Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let the record reflect that Millie and
The
Lenny.
two international program people.
Right, exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
Where evaluation is very, very important.
Yeah. And I can pass along my one comment to one of you, and also some folks aren't on the phone
Okay.
or here that may want to participate. So I'll send out a note to people on that. Thank you.
I'm not fully clear though why, if the contract isn't signed, why is it inappropriate at this time to provide feedback into how the final form of the contract?
Because to my understanding, the way we've done RFP, if you're going to make any changes to the RFP, you would have to do so prior to bids being submitted, because it has to be an open process for all
We get
bids
the RFP
to be able to see and respond to the scope that you are putting out
late.
there.
You know, Lance, I don't think we got the RFP prior to submission dates for submissions.
That is true, because this RFP was put out in the street since last summer, well before we even started discussion. Any input from the
Well, it
board.
didn't occur to you that we might want to have input into the EM&D contract, since we base all of our deliberations on the results of EM&D contracts, and you know could have taken the initiative and offered us an opportunity in the summer to review and comment on it.
Well, I will say also Betty Ann I think has joined us on the phone, and there might have been a couple other folks, but just to reflect that.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. I know that when I asked, I think for the first time about the EM&B contract, I think the RFP was already out the door. I think we were talking at that time about how to get our input in, but at least from my recollection and looking at the minutes, that was the sequence of events
That is true.
for us having voiced something. So I think we should make do, and if it's maybe our lawyer can tell us that if that is in fact the case, that you can't do anything to the contract language.
Yeah, the contract is being negotiated, so it's confidential right now. Once it's final and executed, it's public.
Okay, we have had input into contracts before, prior to their being executed. Is that something that we ought to be exploring?
Well, the SU contract is different, because the SU contract, the RFP, the board plays a significant role per the act in the RFP. Most of the RFPs, they're issued and then there are bids, that are received, and then there's a panel, and then there's a negotiation, and then there's a contract.
It seems to me that it's fairly obvious that if the board wants to have input, that input would have to come before the RFP is prepared, and that the board would suggest the types of things that it would like to see for inclusion in
Yes.
the RFP.
Yeah, and if there are certain things, you can always amend the contract once it's executed.
But what I'm saying is that if we are, since you're saying that once, and I get it, once the RFP is issued, that you cannot change it substantially, because that would put the responders at a disadvantage because they don't really know what they're really responding to. But the RFP is the controlling document, and that's where the board needs to have input before it goes out on the street.
Yes.
Well,
And since we know our concerns,
I mean, we've been very open all along about our problems with the EM&D process, how late reports are, they're not in sync, they don't address certain problematic issues, and I want to go on record as voicing I have a concern that it's that supposedly we have to come up with every request we want. I mean, you all are supposed to be supporting the board, and you're going to be writing an RFP of this magnitude, that it ought to be part of a normal way of doing business, that you request the board's input.
Well, keep in mind that when the board weighed in on the SCU's RFP, it's because the SCU is exempt from the Procurement Practices
Now,
Act.
keep in mind, you are supposed to support us.
I understand.
And okay.
I'm responding to your comment, and what I'm responding is I'm saying, typically we do not send out RFPs to any entities. We would have needed special
I know.
permissions
Look,
to do that. I
okay.
get your point.
The point
But I'm
is
saying-
that kind of special permission should be readily forthcoming, should it not, Tommy?
What do you mean
It's
special
not-
permission?
This is not the way competition works.
So let me just.
Well, Lonnie, what don't,
I mean, no,
the-
really,
The role of
really,
the board is specified in law, and it's an advisory board. The degree to which the board advises us, especially in terms of the SCU contract, I know that you guys were very involved in the performance measures, and that was very appropriate. So where we are now is that we're going to do an EMB contract, and the board can look at it and see if they think it meets it measures what the board advised and what was included in the RFP, and if not, then we look at how we accommodate that. It's an iterative process together.
The issue for me is not so much what we have before us. I think that where we are is to respond to the contract when it's approved and to the extent that we can have amendments. What I'm suggesting is that on a going forward basis, is there any legal impediment or problem with the board participating by providing its comments, the recommendations that it would like to see in an RFP before it goes out? Now that's, to me, a definition of what the advisory role of the board should be. It's just very, rather than doing it after the fact, you do it before, and then the board is comfortable.
And I think that
that its
Lance
concerns are
acknowledged.
addressed.
I think Lance acknowledged that. And so, thing is that we're way behind
Yeah,
getting this
I mean,
EMB
there's
done.
nothing we can do
And
now.
I don't want to do anything to slow it down
No, I
because
agree.
we got to get it done.
I agree, so that it's looking forward, how do we do it? EMVs come what? How frequently? Every year?
The
So-
contract is the contract yearly.
No,
this has options for further
this
extensions.
contract will have 4 option years attached to it, including a base year that will end at the end of fiscal year 2018, and 4 option years.
So 4
Reason
years,
being,
5 years.
We need
something
the
like
evaluator in place at the end of the 5th year to be able to do a thorough assessment of the benchmarks and the performance for the first 5-year period of the contract.
Okay, so I'm going to recommend, I think we missed the boat for this RFP, which is major because it could be the RFP and the contract that govern for the next 5 years. I know, again, from my review of the minutes, that we did not expressly ask for input into the process until we had read the ENB, and it was already past the point, I think, where the RFP was getting prepared, and were disappointed with the EMB, and so that was when we requested, but the RFP was already out the door. So I think that one recommendation I will make, and I think it might dovetail into some other topics, is if we could get some sort of a look ahead for RFPs or other activities, especially ones that pertain to the performance benchmarks in which we have an obvious interest. That would be helpful so that we're not after the fact trying to catch
Is
up.
it possible to place the RFP in the Dropbox so that if we do have amendments that we'd like to make, at least we can
It's
in
in there.
preparation?
It should
It's
be.
already in
It's in
there?
Yes, in the
Okay.
Dropbox. We've sent out the RFP, and that's going to be critical because we've been asking for the input and feedback on what is it the board would like to see in the new sets of evaluation reports, and all we've been having is discussions at the table, but no real feedback or input. So hopefully once we get the contract in place, we can have these discussions and then make the necessary additions if it's not already covered.
And I think in fairness to us, we wanted to see what there was in the RFP.
Yeah.
That would help us with baseline. So, okay, so let's go back to, I think, we're gonna check this one off the agenda, right? Because again, it's a packed agenda. And let's go to just approve the agenda and then we can go to introductory remarks. Because I've been rehearsing.
I move to approve the amendment of the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. All in
Go.
favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Introductory remarks. So it seemed like, and we're already up and running, it's a new year. We didn't meet in January. We finished the report at basically around the end of the year, a little bit over. So it seemed like this was a good time for us to reevaluate. The report preparation was painful, soul killing to some degree, and not only just the preparation of the report mechanically, how that occurred, which I think we could talk about, but also the fact that it did seem to be focusing a lot of our attention on the overseer kind of function, which wasn't pleasant. You know, us looking into trying to drill down, trying to figure out finances, et cetera, a lot of which was, I think, in response to city paper and otherwise. So I pulled all the board members that I was able to speak to, and I think I got almost everybody, whether by email or not, just to try and get a temperature on what did folks think for the year going forward. And I think I can summarize from what I heard. I would certainly encourage others to provide their views, but especially for ones on the weren't on the phone, that we would like to have a healthier balance in our discussions. We do feel as a board that our responsibility written into the law is to monitor the performance of the SEU, and sometimes that is going to get into questions as to how is the performance and is there an impediment to the performance, and then that may lead us to questions on expenditures. I'll give you an example that one of the board members gave me that was very helpful over the phone, but that we also do not want to lose sight of the fact that the board was put together because there's a lot of talent in the room and on the board, and we want to be useful, and we want to help we want to be useful to the SEU and to DOE, and we want to help the SEU do a better job. In that regard, I will say that overwhelmingly, and this was surprising to me, I think, from all the board members that I spoke with, I got a general consensus that people still don't know what the SEU does. And in fact, some of that was board members. And so to that degree, I think one issue that we might want to take on is how is it that you all can convey your message better to us? A lot of the folks around the table have boards to whom they report, and we might want to put on an agenda at some point, how is it to communicate better to the board what it is that the SEU does. But separate from the SEU board members themselves feeling like they have an understanding, I think that a lot of the board members said that the constituencies that they represent, they don't feel that those folks outside have a good understanding of what value the SEU can bring. I think everyone acknowledges there's a tremendous amount of value that the SEU can bring, but that the message still isn't getting out there. And the board has discussed on any number of occasions some outreach by the board, some outreach efforts. And I know that was a discussion before I joined this time around, and it didn't go anywhere. And I will say I probably mucked it up as well, because when I was looking at outreach, I thought that was for us to hear from the public what they wanted and for us to make legislative changes. I think that may have bogged it down, and that didn't get anywhere. But maybe that's something that's just part of an iterative process. But it did seem to me that board members were saying, yes, it provides valuable services, can tailor make projects, etc., to particular member needs, and that it might be helpful for us to help to dispense that message at a minimum to the constituencies that we represent at the table. So that was the 30,000 foot survey of board members. I don't know if anybody would like to add to that.
Well, I think, thank you, Vicki. I think one of the things that we both recognize is that there's a lot of talent on the board, and your perspectives of what you bring, in my opinion, from having been here now 3 years, is underutilized. I don't think we get the value, and I don't think we've created the process to get what you bring. I mean, you guys have a lot of experience in oversight and roles and authority in the city, and it seems like we spend a lot of time in a frustrating role of things like about minutes and stuff. And I know that's not a joyful way for you to spend, your Monday, Tuesdays, or Wednesdays. And so I think that one thing is that we can improve the process, but also, as Vicki pointed out, I don't know how much you guys really reflect on or get information about the performance of SEU, of what they're actually doing. I know, and this is not a criticism, it's just a reflection that, and I'm part of this, is that SEU is almost the last presenter in our agenda, meaning that everything else comes first, and then they get shoehorned in at the end. So even the way we structure our time together, SEU is least likely to be able to do a full presentation for us. And if I could think of the number of times that SEU's done a full presentation, it's not that many, even though that's what you're here for. And I think that all the concerns are legitimate, but it is, I think that we shortchange your ability to get information about what's at SEU's, like, what do they plan to accomplish next year? Not just what's in the contract, but what are the kind of projects they're getting teed up? What are the things that they're frustrated with us in being able to accomplish their projects? What are their barriers of not just hitting performance measures, but really, you know, the market changes. Like Lenny, you often send articles and stuff over that are very interesting. The market is always changing. Do we know if the SEU is incorporating market changes? Are they finding that some things are a lot easier than they thought they could do? But also, what's their thinking in terms of relationship to a green bank? Their thinking in relationship to PACE and the other things that are out there. They're only one, you know, piece of what we're all doing out there. And so I think that we've got to figure out a way to structure to leverage your expertise in a more productive way to help make our, you know, this better. And I think that you guys serve on boards, leadership positions. I think that your advice and leadership in that could be very helpful. Thank you, Vicki. I think you captured that very well.
Oh, thank you. As did you, Tommy. I'm not sure if that means that the concrete suggestion coming out of that is to move up on the agenda, the DCU presentations. But for the moment, let me just run through the minutes discussion. I think that we have lost a lot of brain cells over what the minutes ought to look like, and I think that it's not a good use of time to do a verbatim transcript. We can go to the recordings for that. And thank you, Lenora, for your patience in putting all these together. I think I will recommend, and I think that we saw them in the last minutes, and thank you, and the ones that we'll go over today, that, and I think this was a suggestion that our newest member, Billy, made, that we have a section that encapsulates a summary of the actions taken and the requested actions for the next time. And that's probably the most important. And beyond that, I think people can go to the recordings. If anybody has a different view of it, I would encourage them to.
Yeah, I would suggest in my experience with you guys that you don't have a legal fiduciary responsibility to the corporation like you do on a regular board. So what is it that you need from the minutes? It seems like you need two major things. One is the minutes should help you build your annual report. That you should be able to see the minutes as a reflection of the work and things that you focused on, to at least help make the report that you do to the council. It'll give you, you know, a roadmap or some guidance. Well, yeah, we worried about that, and that was addressed here, but this could be better. Second major role of the minutes is to help lay out the agenda, so that the so that staff, when they review the minutes or produce the minutes and then talk to the chair, hopefully before creating the agenda, that there'll be some, okay, this was something that someone brought up to be on the agenda, and then the chair can say, you know what, that's not pressing, we have so many other things, let's put that into the next agenda. It gives the chair more ability to manage the agenda in a way to accomplish the mission. That seems to be, in my opinion, two of the most important parts of the minutes. To build the report and to set your agenda.
Tommy, I totally agree that we need to make minutes more succinct, more focused, and probably more structured in terms of, you know, how we address the various critical issues. But I want to be clear and respond to your comment. While most of the board members don't have a fiduciary relationship, the statutory members do. And so there is, somewhat of an issue in terms of making certain that we have, full representation. But, let me finish up, because I agree with you 102% that, we do have, it's live stream, we have the recorded record, so we can access that. But, I just want to make certain that I
And to be clear, what I mean is in terms of nonprofit law, that you don't have the same type of liability in meeting directors and management, directors and managers insurance. You're not subject to suit for the decisions that you make. That you don't have the same, the minutes are not a legal document. That they are truly a legal document when you are on the board of, say, a corporation or a nonprofit. So that's really what I mean, is that these are not a legal document to be referenced in a lawsuit against you.
But they are, again, we're now belaboring ancillary issue. They are discoverable, and I guess they could be used in a litigating position. We just have the protection against suit, financial indemnity. But, the point is, I think the basic point is, I support reducing or limiting or making certain that the minutes are shorter and more focused.
I also think that Tommy made an excellent point in that the minutes the agendas, and thus the minutes, which reinforce each other, should be structured in such a way that they help us,
Lenny's speaking.
Can you hear me?
Lenny is speaking. You're
Thank you, Betty
interrupting
Ann. The minutes and the agendas reinforce each other, and I think indeed, as Tommy suggested, they should serve as a guide or as a reference for when we start to put together the annual reports. And therefore, we need to come up with a way, and Lenora, I think, can be helpful in doing this when we put together the agendas each time, is to be sure that when time comes and Vicki needs to search the minutes to find discussion of X or Y or Z, that her job is not made impossible. So we might need to keep the minutes in a format that is easier for her to search when it comes time to write the board report to council.
And that would not require a verbatim.
No, it's just she needs to be able to say, okay, well, in our report to council, we want to talk about these three things. How did those three things evolve over the 12 months?
I think a really good example of collaborative agenda setting is what Lance said out about the SREC, the new program that is being considered for the SREC. I don't know if you guys have any suggestions on how we could collaborate like that, whether it's a look ahead or whether there's any sort of system we can put in place so that things like this, before they're implemented, things that we might have expertise that we could contribute to the idea making, how those can get on the agenda and be prioritized.
Yeah, and that's precisely why we're at this point. It's following up on a couple of meetings ago where we agreed to more involvement from the board in the discussions. We have had some deliberations and discussions with the SEO about that program and even the leveraging mechanism. We wanted to get the board's feedback on it. So it's just a matter of us being able to get it on the agenda and be able to discuss it with the Senate. As long as it's a limited amount of time, but that's the approach we're trying to take with all of the major issues that DOE wrestle with, SEO wrestle with, to get the feedback.
So I would like to agree with pretty much everything that's being said right now, and perhaps offer another step in the process to eliminate or create more time in our agenda. One of the things that we recently started doing, or I started doing with my board, was actually doing an email vote of the minutes a week following the meeting so that it stayed fresh. We knew what our action items were. We knew how to create the agenda, and it's voted on outside of the meeting time frame, so that we don't have to sit here for the first 20 minutes talking. So I
That's
make
great.
that suggestion.
I think it's great.
It's a nice idea.
Does something like that work for your all schedules, especially if we have shrunken down minutes that just capture the salient
Oh,
points
yeah.
from the meeting?
Oh, yeah. I'd much rather do it a week after.
Yeah, do we need to, oh, actually, did, Chairman Kane, did you have something you would want to add? Otherwise, I'll suggest if we have to vote on that, those two.
Yes.
Okay, so, Benny Ann, did you want to say something? Maybe not.
I'm sorry, yes, sorry, I could not hear. It's harder to hear than I thought. First of all, Lenny, I thought that was a very good point about the minutes. Kind of tracking the agenda, almost like an action sheet. As we have an agenda, the minutes just, at least, there may be other things on it, but sort of what was done under each of the topics, it does make it easier to go back and look at the agenda and say, okay, we discussed, EM&D, this date, something about that. The other point I wanted to make was kind of follow up on Sandra was talking about fiduciary responsibility, and I totally agree with Tommy. We are first of all, we're advisory, so we're not like the board of directors of some of these other nonprofits. But at least for me, because of my other statutory role, and because the SU is funded with ratepayer money, there is a responsibility there. I wouldn't call it so much a fiduciary, but it is a legal obligation, and probably for Sandra too, which is different than some of the other board members, perhaps. I think maybe that was the point Sandra was trying to make.
Yes.
It really doesn't have to do with the structure of the fact that SDU is a nonprofit or we're an advisory board, but of our other roles are government roles. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
And I guess I would just. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, this is Vicki, I would maybe add or put a gloss, which is that the people who don't have statutory responsibilities there's still a statute that says that we are asked by the mayor to provide, monitoring and reporting on performance, and I think that was what was, I was hearing from everybody when I told them that people take that statutory duty, it may not be fiduciary, but take it seriously, that is value added, or that's what they were asked to do. So how that translates legally, I have no idea.
So one of the things I would add to the action item piece is actually creating assignments as part of that process, because it does create accountability and ownership of different pieces of those action items. And so when you go back and make that review and approval of those minutes a week later, people know what they've been charged to do, and they've taken ownership over certain things.
Okay.
And then it's on record, and we're saying we're going to do something, so
Right,
it does
no,
kind of
great.
hold people accountable.
That's
Right.
great. Okay, so let's
So
move
can we let
to
Ted talk? I mean, we're halfway through.
We need to make a motion.
Right,
Yeah.
we need to finish
Okay.
this piece too. So we'll make a motion, please, that to aim for having minutes out a week after the meeting that specifies actions taken by the board, requested actions for the next meeting, and makes assignments of responsibility.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. And then I'm just gonna add, maybe substitute, I just said I would volunteer to, find other folks who would participate in the EM&B subgroup, and maybe Lenora, if you would be so kind, when you send out the minutes or maybe after this meeting, if you could send out a note to the board members who weren't here, to ask them if they want to participate in the subcommittee on EM&B, and then they should let me know. That would be great. Thank you. Okay, so I'm assuming, because we are supposed to sign off on our minutes, does anybody have any comments or maybe speedily dispose of agenda item of approving the minutes from December 18th and from October 16th, 2017? Then let the record reflect John Misrock has entered the room.
I was been downstairs for about 15 minutes.
Oh,
Sorry
sorry.
about that.
Apologies.
Our apologies. Sorry.
Okay, I only had on page 9 that there were 2 typos in the October 16th minutes. I didn't have anything else on any of them. Did anybody else on October 16th or December 18th? Going once, going twice? That's what happens when I cheat.
That's
So
right.
okay, I'm moving to approve the October 16th and December 18th minutes. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, and then one other thing, and we'll let Ted speak, which is that I received a call from Dan Wedderburn that he was resigning from the community. And, yeah, he said he's got a lot going on and he's just not able to do so, and he apologized and he has to be taken out of town tomorrow, so he wasn't able to come, but I asked him, I hope that he will get on the phone so that we can all say thank you.
Yeah.
Duffy, does anybody gonna want to do that? So I just wanted to give people a heads up that he told them that I didn't know. Whoop, hello, did somebody just join?
Yes.
I have those numbers. Did someone else just get on the phone? Okay. Okay, let's move to,
Vicky,
Yes.
he should send a letter of resignation to Mora to let them know that he resigned.
okay, could you guys let him know that?
Yeah.
Is that an action item? Okay, thank you. And then we may also want to talk about the additional vacancies. So Ted, you have 2 things, right? The leveraging discussion and the overview
I did.
of the, okay, great, thanks.
That's why it was important for me to get.
Oh, happy Valentine's
I
Day.
think I got enough for everybody to say. And maybe even at the ranks. We'll start
All
that.
right, those of you on the phone are not eating chocolate.
Promise chocolate. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah. My pleasure. I mean, I said I was gonna bring it
Thank you.
Yeah.
Board members first.
Which one are you starting with, Ted?
I will switch this around a little bit. I'm going to do an abbreviated version of where we are financially because I think the more important discussion is the one about what we're doing in the leveraging space and the SREC proposal that I think some of you, I think that is much more meritorious of a discussion. And so I will give a quick synopsis of thank you very much. Nicole.
Anybody who wants.
Where we are financially through essentially the first quarter of the fiscal year. As you know, we're sitting here in mid-January, so we have results that have come through for our performance in October. Don't go there. October through December, and then we'll move forward. But before I go there, Madam Chair, I really wanted to talk about your opening remarks when you discussed having polled the board and having come to some conclusions about some of the thoughts that the board had about the sustainable energy utility. And I think you pointed out something extremely interesting. A number of the board members expressed that they did not know what the SCU does. And as much as I don't like to use this word on Valentine's Day, it's a little bit disheartening, quite frankly, that some of you I know have sat around this table for more than a half a decade, and that I hope those were not amongst those who chimed in and said they don't know what the SCU does. But behind that statement, I think there's also a thought about it's not only what the SCU does. We sit here on a monthly or bi-monthly basis and look at results that come out of the SCU. It's how we do what we do. And then I think more fundamentally is we want to articulate that to our constituents. It's why we do it. So if the board might indulge me for a moment with this offer, and I know this rubs a lot of people the wrong way, or it will rub them the wrong way when I make it. We tried, I think when various new members of the board were sworn in almost a couple of years ago, to have a a meeting with the board, a deep dive about what we do, how we do it, why we do it. And that meeting pretty much got, what's the word? The majority of that meeting really focused from a legal perspective from someone from the mayor's office about conflicts of interest. And for 2.5 hours, and I love Thorne Posey, he's an old friend of mine, but Thorne talked about potential conflicts of interest on the board, and by the time, again, it got to the SEU's turn to talk about what we do, why we do it, how we do it, and the value that it brings to the residents and businesses here in the city, 3/4 of you had either left the room or eventually checked out, and I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. But I really think with new members like Kirsten and Lenny, I don't know how long you were able to sit through that meeting. I saw a new member's name here on the list. I couldn't point the gentleman out in the lineup. I don't think he's been in these meetings, and I don't blame him for his frustration of, like, why should I come to these meetings? I don't even know what this really does. We need to sit down and have that discussion again. Sandra, for those of you who have been around since before the Clean Affordable Energy Act, I'll give you a hall pass that day, and you can go on and do the good people's work. And John, I'll give you the same hall pass as well. But for some of the others who clearly articulated that they don't know what we're doing or how we're doing it or why we're doing it, I'm here every day. We can do it here, we can do it at my office, we can do it out on the corner, but I can't sit here in front of you after 6+ years and continue to hear comments like this about we don't know what the SEU does and what value it brings to the residents of this city. I tell you, it's extremely painful for me to have to hear something like that. And I'm not saying it's not valid. You invited us here, I pointed you. Thank you for inviting us over to your offices to address your membership. We look forward to that opportunity, next month. And we will be there with bells on for anyone else in this room who wants to invite us to sit with their stakeholders. Sandra, we've done this with your group as well. But for anybody else who wants to open their doors and allow us to come in and talk about what we do, how we do it, why we do it, I'm not trying to hide a thing. I'll be as transparent, and I'll take as much time and bring whatever resources you need me to bring to the table. Please let me understand what the information gap is, because I sit here in these meetings month after month, and I almost feel like there's some sort of a public imposition that goes on after the articles that came out in that rag that was sold for $50,000. And people think that something nefarious is going on, and I'm tired of it. And I think it's time. Okay, Sandra, I'll calm down.
So,
thank you.
If I could just make 3 quick comments to that. One, I think I know what you do, but who really knows it anymore? But I'm pretty sure that the people who've been here a while,
we know what we know what
know what the mission is. The second thing is, in response to your comment about you don't blame people for not coming and sitting through meetings, they should resign. Because nobody should be on a board, paid or unpaid, that doesn't intend to participate. And the third thing is that I'm not going to ask to identify who said that, but it's actually kind of an absurd comment that somebody. I mean, if somebody said it, I guess they said it.
I'm not accusing the chair of having misquoted anybody or misunderstood anybody. I think it was probably said to her in a genuine spirit of either frustration or lack of understanding or maybe wanting to know more. And that's why I'm making the offer that I'm making this morning.
And I'll use the context of, I did give Vicki, this is Kirsten on the phone, for those who are on the phone, the context that we did want to extend an invitation to the SEU because through my lens, the scope of where you started in the inception versus today has grown tremendously, and that there are multiple opportunities for my constituency, my members, to partner with the SEU that they may not be aware of, because because of the vast nature of how you've grown and developed. So that in context is a little bit of why, for me, I think what you are, who you do as a new member would be valuable. Granted, we have, I guess, maybe that predated MOTA, and we've already received our conflict of interest ethics training. But it is just good to sit down and say, here's how a residential customer can benefit. Here's how a commercial customer can benefit. Because ideally, we are spokespersons for you outside of your individual jobs. Respectively, my members can say, oh, here you're on the STU advisory board. Is there a way that, I can benefit? I would love to be able to say, yes, and here's an example, look at AU or look at, and we may not get those opportunities through the meeting, and that's what I was saying would be helpful for me sometimes, just to know more intimately those examples of how I can be a voice to dispel rumors, myths, or enhance what you're doing. So not as a negative. So I apologize if it was taken that way. It was not at all.
Let me say a couple of things. First of all, thank you for the invitation. We didn't get off to the best of starts 6 or so years ago when we tried to reach out and have a conversation. You mentioned you weren't there. There were others there. I don't. Our organization doesn't look all today like yours. So therefore, we thank you for inviting us over, and we will be there with bells on to lay it bare, as you say, in an intimate way, and let you know anything at all about how to work with us, what we do, and how your members can benefit from the services that we're providing in the city. We really look forward to it. And as I said, and that goes to anybody else in particular. Sandra, it's been a few years since we met.
So Ted, I'm sorry, I just wanted to jump in a little bit there as well, because I'm going to have to go back into another meeting and then come right back in. And this is Donna speaking. I just wanted to just note that definitely, I would say everyone around that table definitely, to a large degree, understands and should understand what the DCSU's purpose and what it is executing upon. From my perspective, you've always done a very good job of presenting the information and being responsive to all other detailed questions that we may raise. One thing that I believe that is always critical, each of us have a specific role, and we're selected for different reasons of being on the DCSU board. So that collaboration as it relates to the expertise, the stakeholders that we're directly connected to, is a way to maximize and expose the DCSU. So I have appreciated some of the meetings that we've had more recently as it relates to the programs, looking for opportunities in which we can partner better, as well as share data and information. And I think that just needs to obviously continue and be maximized by all of the stakeholders that are part of the DCSU. And I know that everyone is taking efforts to do that. So looking forward to obviously 2018. One of the things that I did note, Vicki, in the comments that I shared, we've consistently talked about the exposure, more information to external stakeholders about the DCSU, its role, its achievements, its outcomes. And I think this is a great year for us to think strategically about how to do more of that with the support of the individuals that are around the table for that very purpose.
So I was just going to suggest for moving forward, because I think I need to stick by what I said, because it was something that I heard, and I think it's, we need to respect that position as well, that some have voiced a concern to me that they aren't confident that they're understanding the full picture. And I think towards that end, it's never too late. We talked about a retreat. We were beaten down by that by the person who no longer holds a job. We were not allowed to do subdivisions or subcommittees or have quiet conversations because we're not allowed that by the ethics person who's no longer there. So I don't know what to do with that. Whether or not that means
and Madam Chair, if you don't mind, talk to the people with whom you spoke earlier. If they don't mind having their names divulged to me offline, we don't have to do it.
I'd like to just go on, if I may, which is that if we could do a retreat again, let's do one. And if we invite everybody in the public, let's just do it. And those who want to do it, spend, I'm sorry, Saturday morning or something, or Saturday afternoon. I can't do it during the workday. I can't do any more hours than I am now. we have also talked about, retreats, just us, but those were not permitted. One other thing I noticed is that from going over the meetings, I think you had said that you were going to invite us all to the presentation done for PepCo, and I didn't get an invitation. I'm okay with that. But I think it's a good idea if there are going to be fora where the SEU is presenting, let us know those things in advance, and then we can join if it's appropriate.
I was invited to something that I attended.
3 of you got to that presentation.
I may have missed it, and my bad, and I'm quite sure I did. But anyhow, I just encourage opportunities for folks to know and listen in and brush up.
And on that, Vicki, I'm hearing what everyone is saying, and I definitely see a lot of different perspectives here. And I'm thinking about ways to sort of address those gaps, and I'm thinking about structure. One of the things that I think might be helpful, and I'm looking at the board as well, there's a lot of new faces, but there's also a lot of not new faces.
Say old.
One of the things that I do is for all new people on my board, I take an hour and do a webinar on grid alternatives. And so there could be an opportunity where Ted has an opportunity to connect with that new individual one-on-one to talk about your programs and your goals for the year and give that opportunity for them to ask questions. I then also do it and make it available to anybody who wants a refresher, once a year. So that could be a way to help set the stage. I also try to have one-on-ones, and I don't know if this is an issue with ethics or anything, one-on-ones with everyone on my board once a quarter. And I find that that's helpful to help build those relationships and give opportunity for everyone to ask questions and feel like they're part of that conversation. And really feel like that they can provide the expertise that they provide to the board to you. And really sort of more than scratch the surface and figure out what that is. So I'm sitting here thinking I also sit on in the board of MDVCO, but we've never done anything together. And so is there an opportunity there where I can bring in the entire East Coast renewable energy industry and have a conversation? What does that partnership look like, and how can we support each other? So and that's just one example. I'm trying to think about sort of structural opportunities to bridge that gap where there is some concern.
I appreciate that very much. I do, and as I said, I'm open to any and all suggestions, and I will make myself. If it's one-on-ones, if it's a get together on Saturday afternoon, let's do it, because we spend too much time here and around this table for members to be expressing some of these views. I'm curious when I get you and Mouse. I get you guys Brandon. I don't take it out of you. Anyway, enough of that. Let me go into the numbers. You're not here to hear me.
We, as a board, want to adopt any of those suggestions or put them in.
Personally, I don't want to do a one-on-one. I don't have time. I would be thrilled to do a retreat, which I think we've talked about, for whether it's just an education or just also an opportunity to have a retreat, which I think we've all said we could benefit from.
Yeah. But I think in particular the recommendation regarding MBD should be brought up as an agenda item looking forward.
As a specific recommendation. That way, any help you need in making it happen.
So may I just, I'm sorry, I was going to say, let's put on the agenda to, if people want to do this, to schedule some sort of a retreat. I don't care if it's Friday, well, not Friday afternoon, that's when filing days are, but maybe we can do a doodle or something on that. And in terms of process for recommending other organizations with whom to present, is there any need for a formulaic process, or people just send in emails and say, how about this? Because you may already have an ongoing dialogue with an organization.
We have it with several, but like I said, if there are others with whom you're familiar and you might suggest you guys ought to have a conversation with Group A or Group B.
So an email to you is my question.
Absolutely fine.
That's good. If I, just briefly, I wanted to reinforce from my perspective something that Donna said that I think bears repeating, which is almost all the board members are appointed to represent various constituencies and communities. And, those, you know, apart from their personal views, they're supposed to be broadly representing, you know, just a huge, wide range of the entire community, you know, from the utilities to you know, the constituency that's underrepresented, which is everybody, to you know, the building industry, whatever. And so, you know, I think over time, and you know, because I've been around too long, probably way too long. I don't, you know, with new members and whatever, I really think it's a valuable part of what the board's supposed to do, represent those constituencies. I don't think it's always clear that we're doing. I think we're doing it, but I don't think it's clear that we're doing it. I think it's a valuable point to think through as we act. Whatever Tommy thinks we're supposed to be doing, acting as an advisory board, you know, that we're representing these various voices.
And I would like to say, I do think an orientation would be helpful for members. So
I'm voting for the retreat,
people could,
but that's just
people
me.
could opt in. They're not, that's something.
I like that idea.
No, not mutually exclusive.
All right, good. First, I'm not going to blind you with the slide, I promise. I'm going to go over a few highlights here financially, where we are after the first quarter. The part of the discussion today should really be with our financing and leverage. So I'm going to go over it really quickly to say, basically what you're looking at in the top couple of lines, top lines 1A through 3 are cumulative results. Remember, we're in the second year now of a 5-year contract, so we're not presenting this, and we'll print this all out here and send it over to you in email. We won't burn up the trees, but cumulatively where we are after the first quarter of in the middle of the second year of a 5-year contract, and shows you savings wise, this is the percentage of progress to the maximum year 2 goal on the far right-hand corner for the electric. So you see it's about 67% of the way to the max on the electric savings goal, about 71% of the way to the maximum on the natural gas savings goal. Are you understanding visually the way we're presenting this? And like I said, let us send this to you in an email. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to send this one out in advance.
A quick question. Is that percentage by a chunk of how far along you are in the timeline of the year, or is that percentage which you have to hit by at the end of 5 years?
What we have to hit by the end of this fiscal year. Right?
Okay, so that you're not 67% towards achieving the goal of a 5-year contract.
No, this
but
is
of what you're doing within
towards where we need to be by the end of September of this year.
Got it.
That's how we do things.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry, which is, and I don't know if this is the way it works or not, when it was an annual contract, then there was always, I think, an expectation that every year the contract would need some time to get up and running, and then things would get, crowded towards the end of the year, hockey stick issue, and with that smoothing out now, are there more internal milestones for as the year progresses? Do you have, or is that another layer of complication? I was just wondering how it is.
It's not a layer of complication at all. But if you would have seen this over the prior 6 years, you would have seen this in a 1-year snapshot, where we were year to date. So we've been looking at 3 months. Now, some of the goals, as you know, Madam Chair, are annual goals. So when we get towards these annual goals here, you're still seeing basically 3 months worth of performance. And again, not to dwell on this one too much because I really want to let on finance get up and do it. I think the biggest takeaway from this one is we're ahead of spending overall for where we would normally be after 3 months of the fiscal year. We're doing well in terms of goal attainment overall for where we should be, you know, trying to get to the cumulative goals in 2 years. Where we are behind this year, and it's intentional because we're launching the low income program, we're behind significantly in what you might see in the low income spending and savings category because we just launched a low income program where we know we need more buy-in from the building owners to get more, to get greater energy savings in the low income space. And so when we launched that program, we told the contractors and the developers come back to us with proposals. And we gave them a date certain by which we evaluate them and then assign work orders to get that work done on the street. So this low income savings number right here really won't move too much probably in before about July or so. As people are coming in and bringing us projects that will be evaluated. Give me the time frame that you promised the contractor. Salome over there is the one who launched that. She runs our program management office. And so the contractors are due to bring the projects in by when? By March 9th. Okay, so that's, you know, that's about 3 weeks now. We told them we would take how long to evaluate them? A week. And we get work orders out on the street. And then you'll start to see not only the low income spend number pick up, but we also get a lot of certified business enterprises who do that work. So you'll see the certified business enterprise numbers picking up as well. But so that's why that particular one is so low right now. Otherwise, things are trucking right along. Okay. Right. Let's go about 3 slides down. I'm not going to talk about this.
For the board purposes, this table is included in the report that we sent out, the first quarter report.
Go back. Yeah, this one, because I'd love to talk about this. The Washington Post actually quoted us twice in an article last week, I want to say, that...
Could you send that to us, please?
Absolutely. Send that around. It's really, really a testament to the pickup and the good public relations and marketing that we've been able to do. This is an interview I did about a month ago talking about the booming population here. Chairman Kane, I know you've talked about how much the population has gone up by about 13% or so over the last few years, how energy consumption is remaining pretty stable. So that there's an article there. And then the final one down here, I hope that I can't sing the Olympic thing, but I hope you guys have been watching the Olympics. As you know, we have a thermostat rebate program with Nest, and in the commercials that Nest has been running during the commercials, they feature the SCU there and talk about how you can, you know, email the SCU and get a rebate on your Nest thermostat. So if you, I don't know if you guys have watched the Olympics to see the gentleman last night won that half-pipe competition. Sean White. Yeah, I stayed and watched that one. But they're also featuring the SCU in these commercials that are being shown regionally, not nationally. But it is a great partnership, and you're going to hear more when Anmal talks about some of the partnerships and things that we're bringing to the organization to really help bolster what we're doing and get the word out more about the opportunities that are available. This is clearly a residential offering here. But we've done very well with that launch of the Nest Thermostat program, I think last summer or so, when we launched it. We've seen what the media can do when we do these strategic buys. This isn't a buy, in fact, this is, Nest did this, we didn't spend a dime on this advertising, but it's partnerships and leveraging that and bringing it to the fold. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anna, who's really going to talk about number one, of course, as you saw, if you go back 3 slides, we have a leveraging goal, which is new to the contract as a, yeah, one development. Yeah. So leveraging goal, is the third one. Yes, leveraging funds up here, line 3. As you can see, the goal is $1 million a year, cumulatively $5 million over the 5 years of the contract. The $239,000 that we have leveraged in to date represents money that we have received from bidding into the PJM market. But clearly, $239,000 is way short of the $5 million. And this $239,000 will go up because that we get ongoing quarterly payments from our bid into PJM. But we have to do more than that. Clearly, that money will never singularly get us to the $5 million mark. So that's why Anmol is going to be here to talk about some of the other activities that we're doing, and I think the SREC program as well. All right.
And may I just ask, I'm sorry, back on the marketing slide or topic, was one of the items that Sean Scully brought up to me, which I thought was a good question, was with regard to marketing, as we're saying, getting the message out into the community or to the constituencies, whether there's any sort of a metric for how effective is the marketing mechanism. For example, is there anything that would say X megawatts reduced of consumption as a result of this ad campaign or something, or just because the question was, if the messages haven't gotten into the community, is there a way to improve the messaging, or a way to measure if the messaging is effective?
Let me partially answer that, if you might, and let me ask Ben Burdick, our marketing manager, to help me out here a little bit. There are some forms of messaging that we do where we do keep a tally of how many views we had, how many clicks there were. There are some ways that we can absolutely measure how many people look, how pages they view. There are some forms that we advertise in print ads, something like that, where you can't really say how many people saw it in the newspaper. With this Nest ad down here, we know that there are how many people roughly viewing in our marketplace right now?
Or the Olympic ad?
For the Olympic ad.
It depends on so I have a chart that is provided by a different buyer that can show different costs at different time periods for different ads. What the different circulation is during that time.
And we can, particularly this next one, a good one, where we could show where we did a certain amount of advertising. Did all of that advertising lead to the over 2,000 thermostats that we incentivized in that time period? I don't want to give you that with 100% certainty, but we know how many thermostats we incentivized and the savings that came from those for that initiative. So,
and to Sean's point, he may be saying, so in those individuals, I guess when they're requesting the rebate, is it a way that you can then survey them and say, how did you hear about this? Was it, the Washington Post? So
that information is covered as part of the process evaluation that's done in DCSU programs, where they try to tease out the answers to these things when we're having one-on-one interviews with businesses and homeowners who've participated in the program. Secondly, as part of the scope of work that's in the new RFP, we plan to do a marketing effectiveness study, which addresses DCSU marketing in general across the board and not just program specific, so that we can understand to the extent to which these things are being effective.
As the people who take advantage of DCSU rebate might have done so, are asked how they heard about the SEU and that rebate.
So my brother's in the advertising business, and there's an old saying, which is actually probably got a certain amount of truth to it, which is that 50% of your advertising works. The problem is you can't figure out which 50%.
Thanks.
Sure. Excellent.
You should be right after
I'm right
this
on.
month.
Continue on.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Well, good morning to everyone. Thanks for giving us the time to speak about leveraging today. I believe Lance sent around a few documents prior to this meeting. One was definitely the SREC memo. The second spoke about a concept called the Energy Opportunity Fund, and spoke about volunteerism with the SEU. And third was a copy of the 70 slides. If you have the time to review them and you have questions, is it okay if we take those questions at the end of this presentation? Is that okay? Chances are I might answer some of your questions. The more likely possibility is that you'll have more questions. But in either case, hopefully we can look at that after we run through this. Thank you. So why do we need to leverage resources? Well, first of all, it's a contractual requirement. As Ted mentioned, we need to raise about 5 million in additional funds. It is not an annual benchmark, it's a cumulative benchmark that will be measured at the end of the 5-year period. And there are certain leveraging activities that have been called out specifically in the contract, like federal grants, private funders, financing, PGEM, and renewable energy certificates. While they've been called out, there is a lack of definition in the contract per se on what they really mean by private funding. What do they mean by additional funding? There's also lack of specificity on the operationalization of leveraging. That being said, that's not stopping us from conducting leveraging activities. We're doing them right now. And in parallel, we're trying to figure out with the DOE team what those definitions and operational guidelines are, so that we have a clear sense of what is and not allowed within the context of this contract. The second reason we need to do leveraging is to close the funding gap. As you all know, the SATF allocations for the SEU program is constant over the 5-year contract period, while the energy saving goals in particular rise steeply from 2019 to 2021. So just by cents per kWh saved, there is a funding gap. Plus, my technical team tells me with the new codes that will come into play starting 2020, and the fact that certain measures that form a bulk of our portfolio, like lighting, as they reach a point of saturation, these savings will get more expensive. So not only are the overall saving benchmarks increasing over time while funding remains constant, they should get more expensive also, which should create a funding gap. Now, what is that funding gap? We have an internal model that helps us calibrate and decide how to allocate our SATF resources in order to hit our benchmarks. And when we do that, three things are obvious. Not every dollar leveraged is equal, because it matters who you get the dollar from, what you can do with it, and when you can actually spend it. If you can spend it in 2019, it means your savings are cheaper, so you can get more bang for the buck. If you get your dollars only for the low-income programming, those are programs that have lower yields, which means you can get lesser savings. And if you get funding from a very restricted source, then there's very few things you can do with it. And that also impacts what you can do with the money. So it is not an easy answer, but if you play out the two extreme scenarios, one in which you get extremely flexible money and you can direct it all towards your highest yielding programs, then our funding gap is probably near the 8 million mark. But that's not going to be reality. So the other extreme, where it's highly restricted money and goes towards our lowest yielding programs, then we're looking at a funding gap that's probably in the high teens or low 20s. The third reason, and I think this is the one that is more important and conceptual, is the fact that as an organization, as the district government, and as the district, we all want to increase the impact of our program. Now, whether this means going deeper into the impact of existing programs or expanding the scope, it could be either way. It could also mean there could be internal efficiencies where we use the SATF dollars for the higher yielding programs, but we get additional support for the lower yielding programs, but which have a higher, let's say, impact and higher alignment to a social mission. So these being the reasons why we have to do leverage. Our leveraging approach is that whatever we do within the CSU is keeping in mind the broader climate and energy justice goals of the district, of the department, and of us as the organization. As you all know, DCSU is not a legal entity by itself. It's a program that is on the balance sheet of Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, which is a mission-driven profit that's been around for more than 3 decades. And our ethos is energy and climate justice, recognizing that the burdens of energy and climate fall disproportionately high on the vulnerable part of our society. And that's the lens we bring for all the work we do, whether it's with utility programming or consulting or any other business that we incubate. And the programs and projects that we use deliver a multi-dimensional impact. A lot of the impact so far we've spoken about as benchmarks, but it goes beyond that. And that is something what we've heard from the is that we get too tied into the performance benchmarks and we don't really communicate the overall impact of our work, whether it's at the household level, or the institutional level, or at the district level. And it is these resources that fuel the programs and projects that help create this multi-dimensional impact. The SETF is in the middle, which will be supplemented by the PJM resources, the SREC resources, plus financing, fundraising, partnerships, and sponsorships, the four-pronged leveraging strategy that we have. Now, going back to the impact for a second, I call it multi-dimensional because there is the performance benchmark aspect of it, but we're also creating a better living environment, a better studying environment, a better environment to do our jobs, and that has an impact. We are spurring a green economy in the district to our CBE spend, and the fact that we help so many business startups, whether they're CBEs or not. And while we do a good job of delivering, evaluating, and communicating our impact on performance benchmarks, we as a team realize we need to do a better job of talking about the impact at another level, at the household level, at the business level, at the institution level. And because that, in a sense, is what motivates our leveraging partners, whether it's those are funding or partnerships or sponsorships, that's what they care about. So what we want to do is establish a virtuous cycle between talking about our impacts and with the sources of leveraging. The more leveraging you get, the more impact you get. The more you can talk about that impact in a way that attracts leveraging, the more leveraging you get. So it's a virtuous cycle that we really aim to establish in this contract. So what are some of the leveraging activities within the four-pronged strategy that we spoke about? Funding, some of the counterparts are obvious, like foundations, corporations, governments, and individuals. Some of the examples. Now these examples, some of them are currently undergoing, and some of them are proposed or we are in the exploration stage. So for funding, we are in the process of applying for grants for the Workforce Development Program. But we also think there are other conduits for raising funding, like crowdfunding or point-of-sale donations. And Patricia and my team had a couple of interesting examples of those. Moving on to sponsorships, we believe that a lot of work that we do can attract sponsorships, and we had the pleasure of getting our event a couple of weeks sponsored by PEPCO. We spoke about how to bring new emerging technologies into the lending sector, the district. Similarly with partnerships as well. Now the point of differentiation between sponsorships and partnerships is that while in sponsorships we expect the resources to flow to DCSU. In partnerships, the resource will flow directly to our customers or the programs that receive our funding instead of flowing to us. Because sometimes that's the mode in which people want to give us resources. Both in sponsorships and partnerships, we recognize that there's a real and perceived notion of conflict of interest. So we'll have established guidelines to make sure that there is no such conflict that can arise from partnering or getting our programs and activities sponsored by corporations. And finally, financing. Our rebates, our incentives cover only a fraction of the efficiency of renewable energy measure, and sometimes we recognize that our customers need financing. As a contract, we are not necessarily set up to provide financing ourselves. As an institution, BEIC, we have the ability to provide various credit enhancement facilities. But that being said, right now our role is more as a facilitator between our customers and the existing sources of finance. We facilitate them, we connect those the demand and supply financing together, and our relationship with DC Pays has been going well, and we hope to replicate and extend that relationship with the proposed DC Green Bank as and when it is up and running. We've had a couple of interesting examples where our rebates have been used by customers to buy down the cost of financing because they are allowed to do what they want to do with that money, and in their particular case, they chose to make financing more acceptable for themselves. So these activities and the four-pronged strategy that I've described here might sound familiar to some of you who have worked with nonprofits, because that is essentially the mindset that we're bringing and action in nonprofit. After I stopped being a banker and before joining DCSU, I used to lead financial planning analysis for a nonprofit here in DC. My colleague Patricia is a development professional who's been doing similar work in the DMV area, and Angela, our Director of Finance, has led finance departments for medium and large size nonprofits. And that's the sort of skill and expertise that we want to bring in ensuring that we have the right kind and amount of resources to help make this contract a success. Given the ambitious and the progressive nature of the district government, of the department, the capabilities that we have internally, and more importantly, the social political context in which we're doing this, where people in the grassroots level want to get involved, we believe that these activities, leveraging activities, will really be successful in getting the sort of resources we need. Of course, the caveat being that we need to be able to make sure that the definitions and the operating guidelines within the contract allow us to engage in these. But otherwise, we think we're beautifully poised to actually do this. With that, I'll stop and I'll ask Patricia to present about a couple of activities in more detail.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
All right. So, just a little bit of background on me. So, I joined the DCSU in the summer of last year. Before that, I was with Goodwill of Greater Washington and their development department. So, looking at their funding structure, it's kind of similar to what we want to accomplish here at DCSU. So, they have this huge source of revenue coming from the stores that they operate in the Greater Washington region. But then they also have a development department that fully funds their workforce development program. So workforce development at DCSU is pretty well established, and I think that that's something that we can and have started raising funding for already. So looking at how much it costs per cohort, and we have 2 cohorts per year, it's about $250,000. So if we were able to find grant funding to cover the cost of this program, we could divert the amount of money that we would normally put towards this into other programs that we have. That's a cohort, a class. So each class is about
more specifically.
Each class is about 6 months long. There's about 10 students in each class. So in workforce development speak, that's a cohort. But yeah, so in the district, there are a lot of funders that are very focused on workforce development as a potential funding area. Just looking at the high unemployment rates in Wards 7 and 8, and also the high poverty rate in the district in comparison to other cities nationally. And then looking at my experience with Goodwill, they would raise $2.6 million a year just in support of the workforce development program, and that came from a variety of about 90 different institutional funders, 4,000 individual donors, and their Change Roundup program, which Anmol kind of alluded to before. That's a program that you would expect to go to one of their Goodwill stores, and when you're finishing up your purchase, they ask if you'd like to round it up to the next dollar, and then that money gets funneled into programs as well. So everyone was saying that it couldn't be done because people were already shopping at the stores and donating their used goods, but we really wanted to just give them the opportunity instead of assuming that they didn't want to support. It could be a cause that was very important to them. And so that has grown to $360,000 a year, and the average donation is 47 cents. So it's no stone left unturned when it comes to development. So I'm really excited about that. So far this quarter, we've submitted $550,000 in requests. We won't get all of them. There's about a 10% chance of getting a request approved by a funder that's never supported you before. So it is, as Anmol was talking about building that momentum when you're starting something new like this. Another good option that we're looking at now is residential energy kits. So I hope that you've heard of them. We piloted them last year. They were highly successful among DC residents. 6,000 were distributed, about half went to low-income households. And what you can do is just register on our website, and we would ship one of these kits to your house that had 6 LED bulbs, an advanced power strip, and a faucet aerator. Each kit cost approximately $40, and we just, even though it was wildly successful with residents, and we got a lot of positive feedback from DC residents about it, we don't have the money in the budget this year to continue this program. So looking at this as a potential sponsorship opportunity, we could reinstate this if we found a corporate sponsor that was interested in maybe a little bit of brand visibility. We could say kindly donated or kindly provided by X corporation. With a little disclaimer, this is not an endorsement of X corporation.
What was the total program cost?
So it was 6,000 kits times 40, so about $240,000 a year, or last year. So, I mean, we could do it in smaller increments. Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm a poor note taker. You said that each kit had LED bulbs, a water aerator, and something else?
An advanced power strip.
Advanced power strip. Thank you.
Any other? Is there one? Yeah. All right. So these are just two, I think, good examples of how funding could come in practice, and also how sponsorships could be useful for us. Looking at partnerships as well, there are opportunities for volunteers to come in and support our workforce development program. There's plenty of companies, law firms that offer, volunteer hours, pro bono services, in-kind donations. And when I was at Goodwill, we regularly had volunteers come in and do financial literacy training or help with resume and interview preparation workshops for students going through the programs. That's something that we're currently doing internally, so that staff time being spent on that could be spent on other things. So that's again an additional leverage resource, even though it's not exactly cash. So moving on to the next slide, we had an idea, and we would like your feedback on this. It's all hypothetical right now, but we've been hearing from our program staff and account managers internally, and then some external members of the community, that there really is a gap in what we can provide to businesses or community organizations that don't fit within the low income definition and don't have projects that are large enough to really qualify for any kind of financing assistance. So we want to help them. I want to help them. I want to help these small nonprofits, update their lighting, whatever else they might need to have, a safer environment, save on energy, and save on their bills so that they can put more money towards what matters most to them. So, looking at individual projects and trying to raise money for each of them is not something that I really think is possible, even if we had a huge development staff. So that $2.6 million that I was telling you about, Goodwill raising each year in support of its workforce development programs, they had 6 development staff doing that. So we've worked out internally that we can spend 1.5 full-time equivalents on leveraging. So we need to make sure that what we're doing is efficient and streamlined, and then we're also making the best use of the ratepayer money that's coming to fund salaries like mine. So the idea is that we set up a mechanism where we can raise funds for a large variety of projects instead of just one at a time. So most funders will only accept one request per year per organization. So you don't want to be reaching out to them for one specific project that's only about $5,000. What you want to do is ask them for $100,000 to support projects like X, Y, and Z. And so then that streamlines prospecting, that streamlines internal tracking of funds, and that streamlines reporting back to those funders. So you can tell them about all the great things that the Energy Opportunity Fund has accomplished in partnership with them over the last year. So we know that this could potentially go back to the issue of perceived transparency problems. So the idea is that this would be housed in a separate bank account, and it would have a committee, an advisory committee comprised of local business leaders, probably people from this very board, overseeing how the funds are being managed, just to make sure that there is no question as to whether we're using the funds appropriately or not. But this is the overall idea. I believe the DC Public Library has a DC Public Library Fund. That's kind of a similar idea. It's a mechanism for, it's a 501c3 that's a mechanism for attracting private funding to supplement government funding that is already. Do we like to do something? Are there any questions? Yeah.
Okay. The nonprofit world has been corporatizing itself through B Corps and some other mechanisms. And what you really, I think, need in order to set up and properly operate an energy opportunity fund is to be backed by a fund of funds. And that needs to be, in fact, investment based. And since you are merely a contract of the EIC, and what you're talking about is so small, and therefore very expensive for a funder to make a decision about to track, you might look into having VEIC establish the VEIC Energy Opportunity Fund with a lot more money. And since they have the legal status and you don't, you skip that problem. If you approach funders as a contract, you're going to get nowhere fast. This is where there's a point for us having a contract with VEIC rather than a contract with TIC. Because VEIC ought to be providing some institutional support and backing so that this contract works. It becomes a genuine partnership between the VEIC and the city. If the VEIC, for overall VEIC purposes, were to raise and manage an energy opportunity fund, and you guys apply to it for support, that makes much more sense, it's much more efficient, and you get much more money. So that's just gray hair advice.
I love that. I love that. I'll be the executive director.
No.
The other thing I would
Yeah.
just add to that is, taking into consideration the Green Bank, and there are.
So I had a conversation with Christine, who's doing some market research, I believe, for the Green Bank, the development of the Green Bank now, shortly after she started, to kind of talk about how we could complement each other, and the same market gap that I mentioned here that we would like to address with this. I mentioned to her that I think there's a lot of opportunity for financing options to be available as well. And she seemed to think that was also what she was hearing out in the community, and that there was a real opportunity for us to complement each other in that space. So I hope that is what happens.
Well, I have seen, again, it's 30 years down global. I have seen arrangements whereby a multilateral donor will institute a credit line with the bank, okay? And the bank may be new at reaching out to the particular target of that credit line. And so generally speaking, there's a contract with a local organization to do marketing and pre-screening, appropriate pre-screening, so that there is less of a barrier between the ultimate, in this case, the borrowers. Okay, but that makes the connection. Okay, and that you become essentially an extension agent for the funding agent. And I think if you look into the operations of the green banks, you may find some of that going on. Again, with DCSU status, there's a lot that you cannot do and really should not try to do. You should have other people help you do it. And you have a certain competitive edge when it comes to understanding the target group And that's what you should be selling is your understanding of the target group. You are not going to go operate a fund. I wouldn't give you money for it. Okay? I mean, it's somewhere VEIC has to come into that.
Yes, no, those are great points. And just to clarify, the idea of this fund is not to make investments. It is not to give loans.
Same difference.
It is to just supplement the incentives we give with the extra dollar, because some of these programs just don't get the contribution we want to make. I mean, we have, and much to the annoyance of some of our stakeholders, we don't have a low-income single-family program, and we'd like to have that.
But you can structure your program in such a way that the fund, okay, can make an investment and expect a 1% return, okay? In other words, this is why the B Corp exists. I'm sure the people from VEIC explain this much better than I. But actually, they'll be making investments probably in you rather than in individual projects. And you go out and you work with the individual project, okay? But the way money works, okay, is that it has to flow through people who have to share your responsibility. And somebody has to make something, which is what makes traditional nonprofit funding so good. This used to be called a program-related investment. It's a tax question. But essentially, you're at the bottom of the chain. And you can't exist without the next level up. And that's where I came to VEIC to be speaking with VEIC about, okay, how can we establish a pot of money that we can access for these purposes? And the VEIC come back and say, oh, well, I need a pot to share with you. Okay, so the way they can do it because of their long time, because of their status, because of their overall financial condition, they can, if they wanted to, if they were convinced of the validity, the desirability of the approach and the applicability across all of its programs, there are social impact investors all over the country who want to do something. And that's another kind of, there's another kind of development skill. But people do this, and there are a lot of examples. And, if you just think one level up, how can you convince them to help you put together a pocket?
If I can, I just wanted to get the board's pulse on the whole notion of crowdfunding or even point-of-sale donations regarding public perception of this. Because for us internally, when we discuss it, most people in the public sphere thinks that the SEU is fully funded by the district government. And the idea of receiving additional donations at point of sale or even doing a crowdfunding with the intent of supporting additional work by the SEU projects. I wanted to feel, just see where the board is on this and whether you think that will go over smoothly with folks in the public or whether this idea needs some additional discussion.
I mean, I can give you my own reaction. I don't know about the whole board, but I know that when we talked about leveraging 100 years ago when all this started, it was, exclusively, I think, focusing on PJM and generating revenue to plow back into additional projects. This never would have struck me, the kind of stuff that you're talking about. I think it's great, if it can be accomplished. I think there would still be, in terms of a public perception, a question as to, does that mean then there could be less rate money put into certain projects because there's going to be replacement now from more of this revenue generating mechanism. So it would be really important to be able to distinguish now what's getting funded by this outside money, what's getting funded by.
This problem, Lance, is addressed sort of, kind of, in the office of P3 in the district. And I think they might have some ideas on how to make it palatable.
Which office did you say?
The
Public-private partnership.
I would just add that, I think fundraising, and that's what all of these different things are, they're not investments, but fundraising is something that people expect nonprofits to do.
Thank you.
And so, as long as the perception is that all things that are fundraised for the SU, for the purposes of the SU, go toward the SU, I don't see the problem. I'm not quite understanding like the need for the structure of this, the outside opportunity fund. Like, why can't the donations just go into the SU?
So it's not actually going to be an outside entity. It's just a name that allows us to market it better to potential funders, and then also deal with that potential negative perception in the community. What is the CSU doing with this money? Why are they doing that? So it just allows us to. It's mostly a communication tactic.
Okay, so and that's what I was looking at it going. This is all together.
Yeah.
So I personally don't see a problem with it as long as we're super transparent about everything everything that's fundraised for the SEU goes to the SEU. I think that's just the message.
And I was going to ask a question, which was that, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time because we're over. I was under the impression that this was on the agenda now because this may be a predicate towards some contract modification. So if there is a reason for a contract modification to allow for some of these things and there's some timeline, it might be helpful for us to know about that so we can figure out how to do what we need to do or how to be most helpful.
Well, none of this necessarily require a contract modification. This is just simply the mechanisms by which they will be implementing some of their programs.
Okay.
For example, the SREC Level Support Program, where they want to use SCTF dollars to, buy down the cost of the SRECs for some of the installers and then funnel that money back into the SCTF.
And it started with the $5 million requirement in the contract.
Yeah. The other thing is, I would like to. This is a good opportunity to connect two dots that are very important. There will be more transparency when, not if, when, ECSU presents financial statements rather than budgets. Because in a financial statement, you have something called sources and uses of funds. That's a very nice table. And nonprofits do make those tables. Nonprofits do provide professional financial statements. And I have argued for that consistently, I think. And this is a perfect example of why and how a financial statement provides much more, not only clarity, but detail as to where the money is going, okay? Because you must provide a sources and uses of funds table as part of it. So
I would think I see that the RECs will be directly into the SEU, and I just wonder if optically, actually taking revenue that is a result of the project and taking that money and using it in the SEU, and I know that you could communicate it as being leveraged and being put into other projects, but at the same time, depending on how it's done, I mean, that is taking money that maybe someone from the low income community, maybe someone from, is taking that money and absorbing it back into the SEU. And I feel like that might be more sensitive optically than fundraising for the SEU.
You're talking about
the further slides where you
I know we won't have a chance to cover it.
I think that I had a lot of concerns about that too, because I think when we were talking about lowering the reg price for the developers, that just raised a flag for me. So I clearly wanted to understand more about how there's a benefit to the SEU in that concept. I wasn't quite, and not to the detriment of the end user, i.e. the resident. So if it's a resident or a business, I know you all are saying they're leaving money on the table based upon the program, the materials,
but it didn't. 10 minutes more, we can certainly, go through that and help you connect those dots.
I agree, and one of my questions was, why don't we just educate the consumer so that they could not leave money on the table? What do they need to fulfill that role?
Well, Alma, you want to take it?
Sure,
the SREC support program.
From the last slide. Yeah, the reason we're trying to do this is because what we have heard from customers who are receiving solar panels is that whether or not they have the education to deal with when I say education, the knowledge to deal with how to monetize SRECs, they tend to go for the market option easily available to them. And that tends to be what's being offered by the intermediaries. And what we are trying to do is improve on that offer. So the SREC customer still has the option, by no means is it compulsory for anyone. So the customer has the option of retain the SREC, monetize it periodically, directly with whomever they can find, or go to a sold system or someone else. We are trying to better the upfront offer, saying instead of receiving 700 from an intermediary for 5 years of our SRECs, we'll offer you about $1,000. That's the only thing we're trying to do, is because we know there's value being left on the table for a similar offer. So in the absence of this, nothing would really change, except that they'll have a worse offer.
I think it's important
which
to add
offerers of SRECs have you discussed this with?
So the ones that you can access in the market right now are sold systems for the upfront price on Skyview Ventures, and they all offer the same rate. This is public information.
Oh, I know.
It's a terrible deal.
It is a terrible deal, and the main reason why people go for it is because they don't have all of the funds to install the system up front. So even if they wanted to take a 5-year deal and wait for that money over 5 years, they will still need to find that upfront $4,000 or $5,000 to pay for the system to be installed, because none of the recs or none of the money comes unless you install the system. So the first hurdle is getting the system installed. That's why they go for that, what we call a crappy deal up front.
But then SEU still keeps the upside instead of giving it to the partner.
No, it goes all over the place.
Right, and leverages it to other programs, which I think, that's a great idea, and I think, it'd be great to have a better option than Sol Systems in the marketplace. I'm a little bit concerned about the optics of that and how it will be perceived by the partners.
Yeah, and that's why we're having these discussions. So
Right.
it's your suggestion that the money flowing back on the outside piece be somehow rolled back into low-income programs or given back to the low-income folks?
Well, and that was a question that I had that I wasn't quite clear from the presentation. So is this a customer who is already benefiting from the SEU? So they've been deemed low income and they are receiving some support through one of the SEU programs, or is this anyone who wants to put solar panels on their house?
Well, this is set up to partner with folks that are doing low income right now, or even broadly speaking, renewable energy installation.
Okay.
So it's not existing folks. You'll be putting in new systems with this. So,
But I'm saying, is it someone that we've identified as a low income individual, or is this, I'm pointing at myself, if I decide to, I am low income, that child of mine.
Exactly.
Right.
Remember, GCSU serves everyone in the District of Columbia.
Right.
Let's
So I was
remember
just
that.
trying to understand the
Because
client.
and this can work with any client, low income, non-low income. It can work with any client.
So conceptually, this can be extended to anyone who wants to take avail of this offer. As a pilot, we are trying to make sure that we first reach the low income or income qualified customers first.
Just a suggestion to put in the back of in the batch processing. Yes. And Ted and I have discussed this. There's kind of like a hole in the market, and it has to do with the law. There are condominiums, and condominium associations are like a gap in your service market, which I think if you have something that makes sense to the condominium association or the property manager, and something like this would, as a way to subsidize the cost to the condominium association of making major changes to, let's say there's a 60-year-old electrical system, right? And it just looks very, very expensive when you run the numbers. And there has to be a product available in the market that that they can use to make it, save some money on the association's books. And I know that condominiums are something that they're tricky, and there's a lot of them, and there's no sort of central way to get to them. But that's just a suggestion.
So I know that we're sort of abbreviating this conversation right now due to time. But I guess sort of my perspective is what we would need to be really careful about is making sure that we're not stepping into the market and competing with the market. I know that that is essentially the perspective of industry and the Green Bank, and making sure that the Green Bank is an enhancement of the market and in collaboration of the market rather than competing with the market. And so like how this is structured, because we haven't really walked through the structure of it, I think we would need to be really careful to be super transparent about how this is enhancing the market or how this is providing something that the market cannot provide.
True, and I that's a very valid point that we've touched on. For the way we view this is, we're not competing with them per se, but we're literally stepping in to expand the resources we have available. Because, especially in the low-income space, the less money they receive from these intermediaries like solar systems, is the more money the government has to put on the table to make solar work. So if we can step in and be that bridge, because the market is willing to pay out the funds just over a 5-year period. We're saying, okay, we'll take your 5-year deal and we'll still help those folks out on a more upfront process. So we don't necessarily see this competing because we're not offering a price point that's higher than the market is willing to offer.
So forgive me for my question because it's something I'm unclear about. What education does that customer receive from the SCU? So if I am benefiting in low income, I know it extends beyond just that, but are we helping to educate that customer about all of these opportunities?
Which customer?
The individual who participates through the program.
Which program?
The
person buying
SRECs? Yeah.
The person buying SRECs?
No, the person who receives solar panels through the SCU.
Yeah.
We don't have a program right
No,
now.
Okay.
So
I think
that's
we
why
should
we need
have
to clarify
on
that
the
for you,
agenda
Christine.
the next
We don't
time
have an existing solar.
an extended discussion
I
of
think
this.
the main thing they were referring to is the training. This cohort thing, is that right? Or not?
We're talking about
That's
SRECs.
totally
It's
different.
Gotcha. If I can point out quickly how it works, Kristen. Right now, this pilot is targeted to work with grantees we have under our Solar for All program.
Right.
Those grantees are the point of contact who would recruit the low income, provide all of the necessary education and training about how this SREC works, because we're only talking about taking ownership for the SREC for a 5-year period. After that, the SREC ownership trends back to the homeowner. So you have to provide that education. It's just going to be done by those grantees. The SCU is simply a conduit to help boost the price point for the SREC.
I think on the agenda for the next meeting, we might have an in-depth visit for the SREC program in order to specifically not only better understand the dynamics and the transaction costs, but also to, people pointed out that most people don't understand finance. So there will be an optical issue, and if we can have an in-depth journey through this, and with stopping points for optically, how might this appear and how might we make it look better, and is there a problem? So that would be in-depth, focused primarily on this, so that we can provide, our feedback. I'd like to put this on the agenda for next time.
And that works out timing-wise for you all?
Or does it have to be
Next
sooner?
meeting?
We'll have to move it on.
Will
Yeah,
it have to be
this-
sooner? Okay.
Yes, this would certainly need to be sooner to make sure we're capturing all the necessary feedback before
And why?
this go
What's on
live.
the other end that's driving the
Well,
need to have it done?
as I mentioned before, we have grantees that are ready to get their installation started. And the SU would need to execute certain agreements with those grantees on exactly who's going to be responsible for what, what's the price point going to be. All of those things need to be worked out between the SCU and those grantees.
So when are we saying that?
We could maybe have a small meeting earlier then.
It's fine by me, yeah. But I think it's important, and I'll just throw out, without getting into the merits or the answer, and we can discuss it the next time, but just to think about is, I've just been involved in some dockets in other states where title to the, what gets bid into the PJM or the ISO is a big deal. And then especially if the entity that's doing the bidding and taking the title doesn't act for whatever reason, then there's liability. And so I wanted to just explore whether or not questions like that have been explain, would be even.
Sure. In many ways, what we're trying to do is very analogous to what we do with the PJM already, where all of our customers receive efficiency rebates, hand over the PJM rights, only for us to monetize all of that and put that back into the SU programs. Here, instead of an efficiency measure, we have a PV system, and instead of the rights to monetize the PJM, we have the right to monetize.
Yeah, I'll want to look.
Is there a document that's been produced that explains this?
Yes.
Yeah, we sent around a couple of documents via email.
It's in the.
It's in the
Oh, it's in the
Dropbox.
folder.
It's in the Dropbox.
All right.
Okay, if you haven't had a
The only
chance.
thing I would add, just I know we're wrapping up, but you know, I'm just being sensitive of the renewable energy industry. That's who I'm representing. In that, like, I would try to stay away from saying that people are now getting a crappy deal. Like in terms of like PR.
Hopefully
Okay.
Because I think industry would argue that they're not getting a crappy deal.
No, the way I would frame it is that they're getting the deal that an intermediate change is the best expensive deal.
I mean, he didn't
And to
put it
answer
on.
the crowding
But it doesn't
to
say
private
it's
sector,
going
ultimately,
on.
we're
A
gonna
point of
sell this to an
clarification.
intermediary anyway.
I think
So
that
it's not
clearly,
as
you
if
know,
they're
we
losing that
have
out.
lived what we talk about, in that the SCU did not get an opportunity to do a full presentation. Are we clear that we are going to flip it so that they flip the agenda in the future so that they get to go first and some of the other things
Well,
are
I
put at
think
the
it's
back?
a good idea for us to be cognizant of their needing to have their time to do a presentation, and we don't, I mean, there were other things on the agenda that we did want to hit too. So, I think maybe if it, with everyone's indulgence, it might be a function of what's on the agenda next that we can evaluate. Or are you making another recommendation?
I'm making a recommendation that we do in fact move up the presentations by the SCU.
Yeah, no, that's,
I think that the other things that we do are more administrative in nature and can be important, but can be done at the tail end, and we probably would have more discipline on some of those at the end.
Can we do a doodle on the interim meeting?
A what?
A doodle poll?
yes, please, can we do that?
So are we suggesting next week?
I guess, again, we asked in the beginning of the meeting, is there time crunching out of the time crunching? So we need to know those things, and that was why I asked it before we started the conversation. So yes, I would shoot for next week, or whoever's able to do that.
Can we do next week's the 4-day week?
The week after, you say?
Schedules.
Oh, next week's 4-day week.
Okay. Because the reason why I said next week, if we go 2 weeks, then we'll be probably doing back-to-back meetings. We'll be in March. We have a next board meeting scheduled March 13th, so.
Okay, I mean,
Well, are there enough
just trying to
people
be
still,
sensitive to people's schedules.
are there enough people still present to say,
This is
be the next meeting and skip March, or March? Never. Does that? Would you mind asking that question? If the doodle poll pushes us into 2 weeks out and it's 2 year March, now let's just go with.
Let's just try some next week.
Whatever. Whoever does
Yeah,
that. does
help
that.
Lenora establish dates. That will help you. Because otherwise.
I don't know if there's just controlling
Perception-wise.
Are you adjourned? Madam Chair.
Yeah, like, I think both systems immediately, we don't raise our expectations. Especially when we're
That's not what I
You did not do that. I think they'll take a look at what the.
And you're a young man.
And my little toddler that runs my life
And that's why I made the comment that we need to have conversations with the provider.
You are an Aries couple.
Thank
What's driving
So
that?
this was a wedding gift for my mother. Yes.
Roughly
So I love it. Yeah, the little black cameo. Yeah, and it has a bracelet. Yeah. So I feel like I'm in the.
Maybe for like special occasions.
Yes, exactly. So thank you.
They're gonna have
I will let her know.
Systems are not, you know, like, I would have, I don't know if pre-show systems are.
Probably tell you that, and talk with the lady. They will probably tell you that. I did right. I said, you got a lot to carry. And that's the problem.